Howdy howdy, my name is John, and this video is my August 2020 book haul. This month when I went to the thrift store, I got a little carried away. I picked up a book and I decided that if I thought I might read it at some point, went ahead and picked it up. So I've got quite a few from the thrift store to get through first. The first book is How to Eat Fried Worms. If you've seen my over 30 book tag, you'll know that this book was published in the same year that I was born, 1973. I haven't read this since I was a kid, so I'm looking forward to rereading this book. The next two books are from the Shannara Chronicles. This is book one, The Sword of Shannara, and then this is the prequel to the first book, The First King of Shannara. I've never read the Shannara series, but I did watch the TV show, and it's not the worst TV show I've ever seen, but it did get me interested in the world. I want to kind of explore that world a little bit more. The next book is The ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. I've never read anything by her, so hopefully this is a good introduction to her work. The next book is The Wisdom of Sam Irving. Sam Irving was a U.S. Senator from North Carolina during the Watergate hearings. He was actually the chairman of. This is actually a collection of his quotes, so I'm looking forward to reading this. The next book is Cold as Ice by Charles Sheffield. I've never heard of this author or this series. I did look it up. It turns out it is the first in the series, so at some point I hope to read this and see if it's any good. The next book is For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. The only Ernest Hemingway I've ever read is The Sun Also Rises. The next book is The Linux Network's Administrator Guide. This is from the O'Reilly Publishing, and their animal cover books have always been real good. Linux is one of those things that I've been meaning to get into for the past 25 years. Maybe this book will actually convince me to go ahead and make that leap. The next book is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. According to Daniel Green, I am a bad person because I've never read this book, but I'm planning on reading this in October to, kind of get the Halloween vibe going. The next book is Animal Farm by George Orwell. I've read 1984, and it's an interesting book. The next book is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I've never read anything by John Green. I'm mostly familiar with him from his Crash Course YouTube videos. Next is Twilight by Stephanie Meyer. I've neither read this book nor have I seen the movies, and quite honestly, had this not shown up in a used bookstore, I might not have picked up the series up, but it was cheap. I may at some point read this book and see what the fuss is about. Next is Othello by Shakespeare. I haven't read any Shakespeare in a long time, and I've never read this play. The next is A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I've read Oliver Twist, and maybe I read A Christmas Carol at some point. No, I've seen many adaptations of A Christmas Carol. The next book is Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. Not read this book either, and at some point maybe I'll read it. The next book is American Gothic Short Stories. This is a collection of short stories by American authors. I flipped through the table of contents, and I believe the only name I recognized was Edgar Allan Poe. I'm thinking I may read this in October as well to get in the Halloween mood. Next is A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine. I read this book when I was a kid, and when I mean a kid, I mean I was fairly young, so probably early 80s. And I haven't read it since, so I'm looking forward to reading this again. The next book is Crime and Punishment. This edition actually contains essays as well, so this will be a good source to learn how to analyze literature. The next book is The Five People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. Earlier I read Tuesdays with Morrie by the same author, so when I was in the thrift store I saw this and picked it up as well. The next book is A Painted House by John Grisham. This is actually one of my uncle's favorite books, so this is a really nice copy, so I went ahead and picked it up, and I'll be reading this probably pretty soon. Pop quiz time. Do you know who the current Surgeon General is? Actually, I don't. But back in the 80s, everybody knew who C. Everett Koop was. He was the Surgeon General during the Reagan administration. And this looks like a fun biography to read through. The next is Moneyball by Michael Lewis. Of course, this got made into a famous movie. I've not seen the movie nor read the book, but at some point, hopefully I'll get around to both reading this book and seeing the movie. The next book is The Lost World by Michael Crichton. I read Jurassic Park years ago, and of course I enjoyed the first movie, but I've never read this book. And really, I don't know that I've ever seen any of the sequels to the Jurassic Park movie. The next book is 2001: A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. Now, I have a confession to make. The movie based off of this book is my least favorite movie of all time. I hate that movie. However, I did once read a short summary of this book that says, oh, now the movie makes sense. So, will that horrible movie actually make sense after I read this book? I don't know. We'll wait and see. The next book is Means of Ascent by Robert A. Caro. This is the second volume of a multi-volume biography of Lyndon Johnson. This is the only volume that I have thus far. I'll probably try to find the first volume before I dive into this book. The next book is Ronald Reagan President by John Devaney. The next book is Between Hope and History by Bill Clinton. The next book is State of Fear by Michael Crichton. The next book is World Without End by Ken Follett. This book is a sequel of sorts to The Pillars of Earth, a book which I picked up in my first book haul. I still haven't gotten around to reading that book, but at least now when I read that book, I can follow it up with this one. Both of these are pretty thick books. The next book is The Bedford Introduction to Literature. This is obviously a textbook and it's over 2,000 pages. But considering I only picked it up for a couple of dollars, and considering I review books now, I thought, hey, this might actually be something good to read through and, learn more about literature. That concludes all of my thrift store buys. Now I've got two books that I actually bought from Barnes & Noble. The first one is the latest Xanth novel, Just Right by Piers Anthony. This is the 43rd volume in the series, and this is the first time I actually managed to buy a new Xanth novel for a really long time. I've already read and done a review on this one, so if you want to know more, you can check that out. The next is The Chronicles of the Black Company. This contains the first three novels of the Black Company series by Glenn Cook. According to everything I've heard about, it's kind of the original grimdark fantasy novels. I heard about this series from both Slowly Read and the Library of Alexandria. So I'll provide a link to both of them in the description below. Well, that concludes my book haul for the month of August 2020. Is there something you would like to see me read first? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.